So I will be talking about industrial hemp regulations, specifically from the Colorado perspective. Let me just give you a quick breakdown of the company that I work for and also my background so that you know where I'm coming from and my perspective. So Hammer Enterprises is a vertically integrated industrial hemp operation that operates in Colorado, and it was established in November of 2015. In August of 2017, Hammer applied for the first air pollution emissions notice with the state of Colorado Division of Air Pollution Control. And then we were also the very first company that was approved for rezoning as an industrial hemp operation in Jefferson County. Now, why is that important? Because Jefferson County does not allow for marijuana extraction operations. So that's why that's significant. In addition to that, Hammer Enterprises is the first cannabis company that was awarded the Bronze Environmental Achievement Award by the State Health Department's Environmental Leadership Program. So a pretty awesome company, I would say, with a lot of firsts for us. So my background is I used to work for the for the City Health Department, Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. In 2010 was when I started, and I worked there for about 5 years. I was the lead foodborne illness and outbreak investigator, and then when marijuana was legalized, I was the lead marijuana investigator. In 2014, I was the first investigator to present on marijuana and the food safety concerns for marijuana extraction operations and marijuana-infused products. And then I was, again, the first marijuana specialist for the city and county of Denver, and then also for Colorado, because at that point in time, even though it was legal in Colorado, Denver was the only jurisdiction that had any sort of regulatory oversight over marijuana-infused products. Okay? So as an inspector, I implemented the first 5 food safety recalls based off of marijuana-infused products, and that included cease and desist orders for several operations that were not equipped for handling and processing of food. It included product disposals of ROP, or reduced oxygen packaging, vacuum packaged products, products that were treated as non-potentially hazardous, meaning treated as if it didn't require refrigeration when it actually did require refrigeration, and then also just tainted products. So any product that was tainted with either concentrates that were extracted from pesticide-laden plant material. So a lot of different things there. Let's see here. I have a bachelor's degree in microbiology from the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York, and I have several certifications, including PCQI and SurfSafe, and then also being a respirator fit tester. So in addition to me being the first person to do the first 5 safety recalls, I was also the lead investigator for the first foodborne illness outbreak that happened to a licensed recreational marijuana-infused product. Do you guys recall the Pot Pavilion back in 2014? It was in Denver. There was an outbreak investigation. And so essentially what happened was the manufacturer had produced infused and non-infused products, and they were disseminating it at a local event, the Pot Pavilion, back in 2014. There were numerous people, including children, who had gotten sick because they were given product that they didn't know was tainted with marijuana, essentially, and they were consuming large quantities. So why is this significant? It was the very first foodborne illness outbreak associated with a marijuana-infused product. And as a health inspector, you don't really know how to deal with it because you don't understand all of the symptoms, you don't understand the incubation period, you don't understand the duration, it's all dependent upon the dosage. So it was very significant to the point where the Colorado Integrated Food Safety Center of Excellence, and there's only 6 in the nation, and this is led by CDC, they actually created a case study on that outbreak investigation that I conducted in 2014. And after that, they've been going around the country teaching other public health agencies on how to conduct foodborne illness outbreak investigations based on my investigation back in 2014. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so in addition to my background from the public health standpoint, I have over 3 years of experience in the cannabis industry, both marijuana and industrial hemp. I oversaw the product research and development, launching Leafs by Snoop back in 2015, and that was the very first commercial celebrity cannabis product line, and that was in Denver. I worked with the Denver Health Department, or I'm sorry, the Denver Fire Department, resulting in C1D1 and C1D2 classifications of extraction operations. Does anybody understand what that is? Class 1, Division 1, Class 1, Division 2. You can thank me for that. So I was working with the Denver Fire Department when I was in the industry, and just, based on the types of solvents that we were dealing with, the extraction rooms were not adequate. So then I worked with them, and that's why they started coming out with that requirement for the hazardous location. And then again, just reiterating the rezoning for Hammer Enterprises. I'm not going to go over this list, but this is just a couple of places that I present at. Extraction training that I do. I've done training for obviously Denver and Colorado, also the state of Alaska, Hawaii, Louisiana, Sheridan Police Department, and currently I still consult with the Denver Fire Department, the State Health Department in Colorado, Oakland Fire, Sheridan Police Department, and also the Michigan Bureau of Fire Services. So I work with a lot of regulatory agencies. So this is just a quick map of the various states and the states that have either adult and medical use, which is the darker green, or just a comprehensive medical marijuana program, and then the lighter green is any CBD or low THC product. Anything that's in gray are states, so there's 7 states that have no marijuana access at all. And the difference between that map and this map is only for industrial hemp. So not as many states have an industrial hemp program. Why is this significant? Because a lot of CBD comes from the industrial hemp plant. You can derive it from marijuana, but you're going to most likely derive it from industrial hemp because it's a higher content, right? Okay. So what's the difference between marijuana and industrial hemp? Really nothing. The cannabis, it's cannabis sativa, so it's same genus, same species. The only difference is the THC content. So if you look at the definition for marijuana, it just says that it's all parts of the plant, cannabis sativa, whether growing or not, the seeds thereof, the resin extracted from any part of such plant, and every compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, and preparation of such plant, its seeds and resin. So that's what marijuana is defined as. So this is a picture of a marijuana flower and marijuana seeds. How is industrial hemp defined? Industrial hemp is exactly the same genus, okay, and the only difference is the THC content. So as long as it does not exceed 0.3% on a dry weight basis of THC, okay? This is an industrial hemp plant that's grown for CBD, so it looks very similar to the marijuana plant, and again, the seeds, very similar. Okay, so who regulates this? In Colorado, the Colorado Department of Agriculture regulates the registration, cultivation of industrial hemp. They also have a certified seed program. And what happens when your plant exceeds that threshold, that standard of identity? So the standard of identity for industrial hemp is less than 0.3% THC. So if it exceeds that, it's a civil penalty. You would have to burn your product and show evidence that that product is not entering commerce, that it's been destroyed, and is not going to be used for human consumption. If it exceeds the 1%, there's a civil penalty, and either one, you can be subject to criminal penalty. The Colorado Department of Agriculture also adopted rules for allowable pesticides used in cannabis cultivation. That includes both marijuana and hemp. And then they also adopted EPA's worker protection standards, which requires owners and employers of agricultural establishments to provide PPE to their workers, to train their workers on the safe use and application of pesticides. And then in addition, they expect for you to train your employees on how to avoid those exposures and how to identify symptoms in the event that you were exposed. So some of the unapproved pesticides that we have seen, not necessarily in hemp, but for marijuana, I was a part of this recall in Colorado, or actually in Denver, Eagle 20. Do you guys know about Eagle 20, myclobutanol? Okay, and I don't know if you've been following it, but in Colorado, and it actually started in Denver, when there was administrative holds and recalls of product that was tainted with Eagle 20 or myclobutanol. In addition to that, there were numerous other pesticides and cultivation ingredients that were not allowed because people were trying to basically fight, the various pests and fungal infections that you can get in cultivating a plant, especially indoors, right? When you're planting or when you're cultivating indoors, you have a very different set of controls, and the plants aren't as hardy. Generally, you have to apply, more pesticides, or you have to have more controls in place so that you don't have tainted product. But what happens to this tainted product? Do you just throw it away? It's unwholesome. Shouldn't be going into commerce, right? Should not be used for human consumption. But what happens? It usually gets extracted because it's not shelf worthy. You can't sell it to the consumer because they can see the powdery mildew or the mold. And so you extract it, which is not okay. And then what do? You turn it into oil. So who regulates it once it's been harvested? So CDA, Colorado Department of Agriculture, is who regulates the cultivation of the plant, but then who regulates after the plant is cultivated? So in Colorado, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is the agency that regulates everything after the harvest, all the way down to the sale of the product, essentially. So in 2017 of July was when Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment issued their policy, their industrial hemp policy. And Hammer Enterprises was pivotal in helping them create and understand what the requirements were for industrial hemp and the extraction processes, so that they are developing their regulations right now. So they don't have a set of regulations per se, but they do have a policy, and there are conditions to that policy, but they're still doing their due diligence, and they have not created regulations for industrial hemp yet. So some of the conditions of Colorado's industrial hemp policy is ensuring that any hemp or any CBD that is used, and keep in mind, I didn't say this, but all parts of the plant utilized in food. So the state health department identifies and regulates hemp or CBD as a food ingredient. Colorado is the only state that regulates it as a food ingredient. So that is, being very forward thinking. We're definitely going against the FDA with respect to how we look at hemp and how we look at CBD and how it's regulated. So because they're looking at it as food, it has to come from a state or a country that has a food safety program or something equivalent to such. In addition to that, that producer or grower has to be in good standing and in compliance with the governing laws for that state or country. That product, hemp, has to meet the standard of identity, so no more than 0.3% of THC. And then you have to have laboratory tests that indicate that those levels are consistent with the standard of identity. And you also have to have documentation. Okay? In addition to that, any sort of labeling that's required, you have to identify hemp as an ingredient. You also have to identify CBD if it's added as an isolate, and you have to include the potency. You have to have the statement, FDA has not evaluated this product for safety or efficacy. And then, of course, not making any health or benefit claims. So you can't say it cures cancer. You can't say that it's for pain relief. You can't say, it's for anxiety. So all of those claims are not allowed, okay? So who has to register? In Colorado, basically everybody. If you're a manufacturer, if you're an extractor, if you do primary extractions, secondary extractions, if you are a brand owner, if you warehouse the product, if you're a retailer, if you want this product to be an approved source that's recognized by the state health department, you must register with the state health department. So I'm going to go over very quickly the approved solvents that are allowed in Colorado. I wanted to just make that distinction between marijuana and industrial hemp. So the list of solvents for marijuana is quite extensive. It might be similar to your state. So obviously any sort of solventless extraction, so dry sifting, dry ice, water, heat press, any non-hydrocarbon, which is ethanol, isopropyl alcohol, acetone, and then CO2. And then for hydrocarbons, we allow for butane, propane, pentane, and heptane. And the difference for industrial hemp is anything in yellow. So obviously all of the solventless extractions, only ethanol, so food grade or pharmacy grade ethanol, or CO2, also food grade as well. So we don't allow for other solvents that aren't allowed for food production. And then the only hydrocarbon that's allowed is hexane. So following that, a lot of people will winterize, they will do other post-processing and refinement to make beautiful product. Some, various concentrates. Some of these could be for food, some of these maybe not. This right here is pure CBD isolate, also made from Hammer Enterprises, pretty good stuff. And then you'll see different types of oils and concentrates. So what are the food safety challenges that you generally come across? It's the same food safety challenges that you would have in any manufacturing facility, but you do have a very special kind of pest that you will find in these facilities, and these are roaches. So these roaches you will only find in, marijuana industrial hemp facilities. No? No? Joke didn't, no? Okay, didn't register? Okay. I know, I'm not a comedian. I will not go down that path, but okay. So same food safety challenges that you would have at any facility. So unapproved source, having people that are not qualified, not trained on good manufacturing practices, unapproved pesticides, unwholesome product. Again, a lot of times people will use this product and they will extract it and they will produce oil out of it and then infuse it into the product. Shelf stability, all sorts of things. One thing that a lot of people don't always look at is the mislabeling and misbranding, which I already discussed with respect to making health claims, traceability of your product. Are you getting it from a reputable source? Are you getting it from a source that's an approved source? Are you getting it from a broker that does not tell you where the product came from? And they're just giving you test results and just giving you an invoice, but they're not telling you where it came from. So that would be an unapproved source, right? And then, of course, any sort of residual solvents and unapproved pesticides. I'm going to see if this plays. I don't know if it will, but we'll try it. Oh. Okay. I don't think it will. Okay. Sorry, I don't think it's going to play. Okay, basically that was a video on the first food safety recall, or not the first, one of the first, and that was from an operator where I implemented 2 food safety recalls. One was because they were using reduced oxygen packaging or vacuum packaging for baked goods, and it wasn't the baked good component, but it was the liquid component, and so we were concerned with Listeria and Clostridium botulinum. And then the second recall was because he was making bubble hash from a washing machine that was broken, and it had mold, and it was dirty and couldn't be cleaned. So you can't use that type of equipment, obviously not approved for food production, right? Okay, some of the other agencies that you want to make sure that you register with, or at least get permits from if you are operating, is making sure that you contact water quality in the event that you have to apply for a discharge permit. Hazardous waste, make sure that you're disposing of your hazardous waste properly. So if you are conducting extraction operations and you're handling hazardous materials, you have to properly dispose of that hazardous waste. Some states will require that you register with the EPA on that, okay? And then air pollution control. Just understand that some of the solvents that you'll be using is considered a VOC. And so what does that mean? That means that you may have to register with your state, indicating that you are using these flammable or hazardous materials that could potentially require a permit. So contact your local authority on that. And then, of course, any sort of fire and life safety concerns when you're handling these hazardous materials. You can deal with the flammability of solvents, cold burns. These are high pressure operations, so if you're doing CO2 extractions, that's under a lot of pressure, right? Butane extractions, not as high pressure, but still could be a hazard. What else? Insufficient airflow, okay? Any sort of fire hazard where you have inadequate suppression or you don't have adequate hazardous exhaust, all of these could be issues. So things that you need to consider when you are conducting extraction operations or any sort of refinement processes. And really, the last message really is to contact all of your local agencies to make sure that you're compliant. And that's it. Anybody have any questions? No questions? Yes.
So it's my understanding that Colorado is probably a little bit more advanced in its various legislative and different concerns and requirements. With the national stage kind of changing a little bit here, do you have any insight into whether or not Colorado's model for marijuana and CBD is going to be followed in other states? How useful is this information for manufacturers in other states? Can you clarify that?
Okay, are you talking about industrial hemp or marijuana?
Let's focus on industrial hemp, please.
Okay, so industrial hemp, Colorado is the only state that has an industrial hemp program. The state health department is speaking to an agency, which I will not say, but it's a federal agency that regulates food. I don't know. There could be maybe one, maybe. Not to say that that agency is providing any guidelines, but they are watching Colorado very closely. And there are other states that have come to Colorado to do training not only for marijuana, but also for industrial hemp. And they're trying to understand. And actually earlier this week, I presented at the Western Association of Food and Drug Officials at a hotel right down the street. And that was for regulators, and there were a lot of people from California, Oregon, Washington that were all in attendance. I generally go to a lot of food safety conferences because that is my background, and I try to train and educate the regulators on these processes and then tell them this is how Colorado is doing it. So there's a lot of conversation that's happening from the regulatory agencies. So we hope.
If I could clarify on that statement one more thing, it seems like that there's basically a manufacturing and a growing process that's regulated by the Department of Agriculture in Colorado, and then after it moves from that process, you said there was a second, it seems like a public health regulatory agency that's handling all of the post-manufacturing and growing process.
So yeah, so Colorado Department of Agriculture will regulate the cultivation. After it's harvested and after any sort of post-harvest processing, like let's just say they have to break down the material, that will still be regulated under CDA. After that, it will be regulated from the state health department. So it'll be regulated like a food commodity.
Like a food commodity, which is in conflict with what the FDA is.
That is correct. So unless it's, yes, that is correct. So unless it's hemp seed, hemp oil, CBD is not an approved food additive from the federal guidelines, from the federal definition. That's considered an adulterant. It's not approved to be added into food, but in Colorado they are identifying it, or at least considering it a food additive that would be approved, and they would regulate it as such using the same regulations for any sort of food manufacturer.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak more about Hammer Enterprises and what that business is?
Sure. So Hammer Enterprises is located in Evergreen, Colorado. It's beautiful. So if anybody comes to Colorado, please make sure that you contact me. We are a vertically integrated operation. We have a farm out in eastern Colorado, and we grow everything using organic methods, but we can't say organically yet because USDA has that definition, and so we have to make sure that we don't say organically grown, but we do not use any sort of chemicals. It's just water and sun and beautiful Colorado weather. And then from that point, we extract all of our plant material. We produce various products. We produce full spectrum oil, CBD isolate, and we're also a white label manufacturer, so we can produce various products as well.
Can you touch a little bit on the difference between your full spectrum and the isolate?
Full spectrum is, a CO2 extracted oil. And again, that's exactly what it is, full spectrum, so it contains less than 0.3% THC in our finished products. And then for the isolate, then it's pure CBD. And we also have in-house testing as well. We're going through validation studies right now for all of our products because we are required to test the potency of every single finished product before it gets released into commerce. And so we have in-house testing. We also work very closely with the various agencies, as you saw, CDA, CDPHE, and we're definitely the role model, for the state of Colorado and other states as well, because, as we go and present, we have a lot of regulatory agencies that will come to Colorado, and they need to understand the process, and you need to make sure that you have good players that can help educate these regulators so that they can properly and fairly enforce and regulate as well in their states. Yes, ma'am.
I live in California, and
Yes.
I can walk into a Sprouts, which is kind of like a Whole Foods, and I can buy hemp protein. I can buy hemp hearts,
Yes,
hemp seeds,
yes.
but I can't buy anything with the word CBD, with the acronym CBD on it.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
So hemp seeds, hemp protein, hemp hearts, that's all derived from the seed. And so there's no THC in it.
Because it's lower in the plant?
Because it's the seed. not because of the location, but it's the seed, and they can test for it, so it's actually an approved food ingredient.
But not CBD with less than 0.3%.
No, because that's the resin, and so that has never been looked at as a food ingredient. And if we're talking, federally, obviously, it's not legal, but in Colorado it is. Yeah. So it just depends on what you're talking about. Hemp seed oil is different from hemp oil. Hemp seed oil is an approved food, but it comes from the seed.
Because the seed is never sprouted and grown?
That, and they've tested it, and there's no THC in it.
But it's still an industrial hemp byproduct.
Correct.
That's why I'm confused.
Well, it can come from the same plant, but it's grown very differently, right? If you're growing for seed versus growing for fiber versus growing for CBD, it's grown very differently, and there's different types of strains. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's the first time I ever thought about that.
Sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So you're saying that there's no THC in the seed, but are you also saying that the CBD is not concentrated in the seed either?
Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
When you say they're grown differently, what do you mean by that?
It's usually a different strain. So if you look at the strain that's grown for fiber and for rope, you can look at it, and phenotypically it's very different from something that's grown for CBD. So if the flowers that you saw, it's very similar to something that's grown for CBD. So kind of like ditchweed. So you'll have like different species. You won't have the cannabis sativa. You might have ruderalis. Yes.
I'm just wondering how all these companies are allowed to sell edible CBD products.
Sure.
from the federal government.
Sure. Well, I will say this, and this isn't just for FDA, but it's for a lot of governmental agencies. They exercise what they call discretionary enforcement, if that makes sense. And so it really, just because something is out there does not mean that it is approved. Does not mean that it doesn't mean that it's being manufactured properly. It doesn't mean that it's being manufactured in a facility that is being regulated, or even in a state that has an industrial hemp program or whatever product it is. So there's a lot of things that you can buy out there that's not being regulated. And so as a consumer and also being in the industry, we have to try and educate our consumers so that they understand the product and where it comes from, and it's being regulated, and it's produced in a manufacturing facility in a state where it's legal. Whereas if it's coming from a state where it's not legal, very unlikely that it's being regulated.
Any worries of a crackdown? They're gonna crack down on them?
Well, if you watch the government, they like to make examples out of companies, right? And so, if you watch FDA, they'll have recalls, and they actually issued warning letters to several CBD manufacturers because of mislabeling, misbranding. Can they get everyone? Probably not, but usually based on a complaint or based on, something very egregious, then they would conduct an investigation. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a legal problem with using the acronym CBD on your product?
Not that I'm aware of right now, but I'm not an attorney.
Because there's a lot of discussion in California now about not being able to use CBD.
Sure. And something that I had discussed with the panelists that I'll be on a panel with tomorrow is there isn't a common name that has been approved, because this is a new commodity, this is a new ingredient or adulterant, depending upon what state, or if you're looking at it from the state or the federal level. And so until there is a commonly accepted name, I don't know who would actually regulate that, because generally it would be FDA that regulates labeling. Yes, sir.
It sounds to me like if you're in a state that obviously is kind of not as progressive, right, but you can open up CBD stores, you'd want to maybe get your suppliers from a state like Colorado, because you know that
Yeah.
another state.
Well, definitely keep in mind what your state, wherever you're operating out of, what they allow. Speak to the agency for that local municipality, because different municipalities have different rules and regulations. And then Also keep in mind that because it's still federally illegal, interstate commerce is federally illegal.
Even for CBD, even for CBD isolate.
Correct. Yes.
So assuming, and this is a hypothetical, I apologize, but assuming the 2018 Farm Bill does pass.
Sure.
No longer is hemp on the Schedule 1 Controlled Substances Act.
If they remove it,
If they remove it.
yeah.
That's the legislation, fingers crossed. If that happens, what would Colorado's position be if someone wanted to manufacture in Colorado?
Sure.
And then export, conversely, if we needed to import into Colorado?
Sure.
Would that be something Colorado would start doing now that it's federally declassified?
What I would say is just because it passes the Farm Bill and it removes it from the federal controlled substances list doesn't mean that the state doesn't still have it on their controlled substances list. So bear that in mind as well.
Absolutely understood, and I'm speaking specifically to the import-export restrictions within the state. Would Colorado at that point be okay exporting to other states
Again, I would say it would depend on whether or not,
on the destination state?
correct, because every state has their own controlled substances list as well.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll have to see. Fingers crossed, right? Yes, sir.
So from your background, it looks like you kind of care about the consumer and the health aspect of it.
Yes.
And I'm hearing keywords from your speech about seeds, pesticides, and that just makes me think about possibly big companies like Bayer, Monsanto, probably getting into this game and kind of wreaking havoc on it. What's your point of view? Are you worried about that?
I think with any new industry, there's going to be big players that will come in and want to kind of put a foothold in it. And I think all we can do is just move forward, because even if they did come in, they would still have a learning curve as well. They would have to get the appropriate people. It would take some time. There's definitely big players out there that are talking about it, or that are doing it in another country. So, if we're looking outside of Colorado and outside of the United States, there are large companies that are, producing product. I'm not going to name any names, but either they're about to or they're going to.
Go ahead,
Yes.
name the names.
Sorry?
I said, go ahead, name them.
Oh, no. No, because there was one that's very big that I just spoke to on Monday, so I can't really say. Sorry? I don't know, maybe. It's a good thing that you're sitting so far away so you don't see my face, because it's a tell-all right there. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any recommendations for resources for someone looking to set up a compliant extraction lab for SOPs or things that people could get information from?
Sure. What state do you operate?
In the state of Oregon?
Oregon. So Oregon has a legal industrial hemp program that also requires that you register with the Oregon Liquor Control Board, right? And then there's inventory tracking for industrial hemp.
Only if you want to sell in licensed, in OLCC facilities. If you don't want to sell in dispensaries, you don't have to necessarily.
Correct.
ODA, but
Correct.
more just from an SOP standpoint in terms of like safety and like hazardous control, like
Sure.
a general resource you recommend to people, or?
SOPs are very specific to every operation and every manufacturer. So I would say, understand your process and then create your SOPs based on that. Yeah, you can probably buy someone's template, but it's not going to be specific to your process, and that's not really what the SOP is for. So yeah. I think I have to wrap it up because they're giving me that signal. Right, thank you.